You are now entering the horror sanctum.
Hello, and welcome back to the Horror Sanctum podcast. I'm Jay with John and Kellen, and we are sad to say that this will be our last episode as a podcast going forward. I know it's hard to believe that on this day, April the 1st, 2024, we are releasing our last episode ever. Anyway, this week, coincidentally enough, we're going to be talking about 1986's April Fool's Day. What are the odds?
What are the odds? When a group of college students, this is the synopsis, by the way, that I pulled from the internet, and it's a half a page long, but I'm going to read it word for word. So just buckle in because spoilers aplenty in this brief synopsis. When a group of college students decide to spend spring break at the secluded island of state of their wealthy classmate Muffy St. John, what starts out as a fun, hedonistic weekend turns into something more sinister. Muffy is very fond of practical jokes and sets up numerous gags throughout her mansion, but when friends begin going missing and turning up dead, they realize that they're trapped on an isolated isle with a mysterious and brutal killer. Or are they, because nobody dies? Spoilers.
I guess we should have said spoilers ahead of time. But I mean, come on, I was 2 years old when this came out, so get with the program.
Yeah, I hadn't seen it until this episode, so there's going to be others out there, but I mean, I'm not giving anything away because this is a very forgettable movie. I liked it. I did not like it. I don't want to start. I saw the eyes go up, the eyebrows go up. It's just a good movie. It's not great. It's not special. I can see why it isn't brought up when people talk about greatest horror films of all time. But I mean, it's an enjoyable watch. It keeps your attention. It has Biff Tannen in it. I mean, how can you go wrong with having one of the greatest movie villains of all time, played by Thomas F. Wilson, and he's good in this too. I mean, he's a good actor. He probably deserved more roles than he got in his career. I'm sure Biff paid the bills for probably the rest of his life. But I mean, he's good in it. And the acting's good. It's not. I was thinking when I got done watching it, I was like, there's not really anything I can point out that's bad. It's just not special, if that makes sense, except for the twist. Again, spoilers, nobody dies, which actually threw me for a loop. And I immediately thought that's such a great curveball for a movie called April Fool's Day, to actually pull the biggest April Fool's Day joke possible in a movie about slashers and people dying, and then surprise, nobody died. Everybody was alive in the end. And it was kind of interesting the way that they revealed it, even up to the very last quote unquote kill, when the girl comes from behind her and slits her throat, and you find out that that's not even real. So that was fun. It was nice that they realized what they were making and didn't take themselves too seriously. I think it would have been a disservice to a movie called April Fool's Day if they would have tried to play it too seriously. Some of the practical effects and the quote unquote gag kills in this movie are really fun. I mean, even in the beginning when the guy, I mean, my first thought when they're on the dock and he throws that knife into that guy's stomach, I was like, who the hell throws a knife at somebody like that that's not trying to kill them? Like, he's literally like, man, quit, and just chucked it at him like he was trying to murder him. And literally I thought, who throws a knife like that? And then he pops up and he's fine. And then like 5 seconds later, a guy gets his head crushed by the boat, also fine. But I mean, the gags that they did for the murders were fun. So like I said, I don't really have anything bad to say about this movie, but again, it's another one of those movies where, like, am I going to watch this every April? No. Am I going to think about it in the future? Probably not. If the opportunity came up to watch it again, would I watch it? Probably, yeah. Because like I said, it's just a fun little quote unquote slasher film. And I think it fits in good with those early 80s, not quite, I wouldn't quite say the Nightmare on Elm Street or Friday the 13th, because those are like the pillar of slasher movies. But it fits in with those B-level slasher movies for the 80s. And I would say it's probably in the upper half instead of the lower half. So yeah, that's my thought on April Fool's Day. I don't really have a lot to say about it. Like I said, it was enjoyable, but it's just a movie. it's not one that you're going to be, yelling at your friends, you've got to see this. But yeah, that's what it was.
I'm a fan. Just to start, I did see this when I was younger, so I do have nostalgia for it. It was a slasher film I probably saw on Encore or something like that back in the day. So I liked it from the beginning. Even as a kid, knowing that it was all a prank at the end and that it was this big setup, I found it like really creative, just sort of in the world of horror back then, when you have all these slasher movies and you kind of see what's coming and they just turn it on its head. I thought that was really fascinating. And I think one reason I really like this movie is you can tell everybody's having so much fun making it. You were talking about Biff, Tom Wilson. He looks like he's just having a blast. Like you can just tell, like in between takes, they're laughing, they're having fun. It's got Amy Steele in it. It's got Deborah Foreman in it. I love both of them. I think Deborah Foreman's like really underrated. She hasn't really done a lot in forever. She was in Valley Girl. She was in this. She was in quite a few 80s movies. The director was actually the same director who did When a Stranger Calls, which is a totally different vibe from this movie. But yeah, I really think it's great. I think it's there's a lot of interesting kills and a lot of things in it that are gags, but really are quite interesting the way they play out. I think it's funny, some of the characters in the movie, like Hal. Well, I guess he says his name is Hal, but they keep calling him Harvey. That's kind of Hollywood's representation of Southerners, and in the 80s and 90s, and sometimes even now. He's kind of like this debutante rich guy, wants to be a rich guy. He's almost like a Clark Gable, only sleazier. But I thought that was funny in the 80s to put a Southerner like that in a film, where he's like obviously Southern, he's got the accent, because a lot of times they just don't do that in these type of films. And I actually looked up that actor. He's from Tennessee. He's from East Tennessee, so that was kind of funny. He wasn't faking any of the accent or anything. The big thing about this movie that is that you can kind of pick apart are the kills. So, like when Hal is hung and he's like hanging in the room, and when the what's her name, the girl is in the bottom of the well and Hal is trying to get her out of the well, it's like there's the fake heads with her. I guess like in real life, if that actually happened, it would be pretty obvious to like figure out what was happening very quick, right? Because you'd see the heads, you'd be like, what the fuck? And you'd grab them and, you'd be like, oh, it's plastic. Or like how, if you saw a dead body, I don't know what you would do, but chances are you'd probably sit there for a minute and be like, and if he starts laughing, then you automatically know, oh shit, it's a prank, right? So there's things like that you can, of course, pick apart in the film, but it's an 80s film. It's supposed to be a lot of fun. I think you just have to roll with it with these type of movies. I don't think that this type of movie would work in 2024. It'd probably be very obnoxious now, because I feel like kids now in college and the way kids are in films now, it would be kind of annoying the way they are portrayed. I think in the 80s and 90s, there was just a certain charm to these type of films and the characterizations and the writing that it just makes it a lot more fun. So I definitely think it's a movie of its time. I don't necessarily agree with what you said about being forgettable. I do think it's very memorable. I think the music is really cool. I think it's shot well. I think the characters and the actors, you get to know that everyone and you like them. I do think it's memorable, but I think it's unique. And it's almost, I mean, really at the end of the day, it's really not a horror movie, right? It's like this weird clue mystery comedy. I don't know. It's hard to describe it. It's a fake slasher film. So
Is it hard to describe because it's so forgettable?
Oh, there you go.
Killing you, dirty bitch.
Oh my gosh. But I do think they did well though with the pranks, because they build up to this scenario of making you feel like even at the end, you don't know what's really happening because there's so many cry wolf scenarios at the beginning. One thing I did find very interesting was there is an alternate ending to this movie that was shot. It's never been released. And the alternate ending actually makes it a slasher movie. Because in the alternate ending, the brother, if you remember at the end of the movie, Muffy, she was like, that's actually my brother. And we said we were cousins. Apparently, in the alternate ending, he ends up killing some of the people and he tries to kill Muffy. And it turns out he was like mad at Muffy because she was inheriting the house and he wanted it. So it was like a revenge thing. And like Muffy like attacks him and kills him, and then Muffy goes to a mental institution. So that would have been a really, really huge left turn for an ending, but I don't know if that's ever been out there. I know it was filmed. I don't think it's ever been released.
I hope his real name was Duffy.
Duffy. Muffy and Duffy. Buffy, Muffy, and Duffy. Wow.
And Luffy.
Yes.
Luffy.
Luffy and Doofy. But I really like this movie. Gosh, it's so much fun to rewatch. And I mean, I'm a fan. I'm gonna be a nerd about it. I've got the CD soundtrack.
That's what I was gonna ask when you mentioned the music. I'm pretty sure that I sent you the link for that soundtrack, didn't I?
You did.
And
yep.
I was disappointed that you bought the CD and not the
I know. That's even weirder buying the CD in 2024.
You just went in and bought the cassette.
I know, right? But yeah, I love it, and I'm curious what Jay thinks because it's definitely an A+ for me.
Well, I think I've slowly realized I'm the easiest to please out of all of us, and it holds true. Like John has the movie, I also have the movie. I'd seen it probably 2 or 3 times, and then I was at McKay's one day and they had it wrapped brand new. I'm like, okay, coming home with me. It should be called Red Herring the movie. I feel like Kellen's already said, all these things happen, but they don't actually happen. I'm also going to piggyback on John about disagreeing about them being a memorable movie. I compare this a lot to Sleepaway Camp. And the reason I compare it to Sleepaway Camp is because of the endings. So the first time you watch this movie, you're probably like, holy shit. You know, same thing with Sleepaway Camp. After you watch it a few more times, the luster, the shine goes away. But as I watched it again today in preparation, I'm like, this is a fun movie. And what was it rated? It's rated R. I guess nudity, maybe. But this is a movie anybody can watch.
The guy gets his penis cut off.
That's true.
They don't show it, but they do. They show the aftermath.
Yeah, it was like he got stabbed or cut off or something. Yeah, it was weird.
Yeah, it was just him laying there with the bloody. Yeah, that was weird. That was a weird little kill. Anyways, I compared to Sleepaway Camp because when I first time I watched Sleepaway Camp, I'm like, oh my God, like I can't believe that. When you go back and watch it for the 100th time, you're like, okay, this is the same way. The first time I watched it, I'm like, oh man, the second time I didn't pay enough attention. You miss little details. This is a completely different movie. But it's a movie anybody can watch. Like I was saying, like I don't think there was any rough gore in it that I can recall. I don't think the language was harsh, and essentially, while it is technically a horror movie, it's not. I guess it could be more of a comedy. We should Google it and see what it actually says under it. But I like this movie a lot. I'm a sucker for 80s movies anyways. Great cast. Biff was great. He's a good jock. Like, I don't know how many movies he was in where he played a jock, but he should have been. He's Flash Thompson from Spider-Man. Like, he would have been perfect for that role if it had come during a time when he was younger. But my biggest takeaway from the movie watching it again is, with friends like those, who needs enemies? I've had some friends in my life that can't be serious, and like even back at us being guys, and us three have never discussed this, but I'm sure we can all relate to some degree. There were always people in our lives that wanted to hit you in the nuts, like what's the capital time on Bangkok, stuff like that. That's this group of friends, like, we're just going to joke around all day, but it's not like, hey, I'm pregnant. It's like, oh shit, his head got smashed by a fucking boat. Like it's just like to the extreme with what they do.
Well, and with you saying that, that's kind of the people that die in the horror movies. This is just a full ensemble cast of the people that are usually the first ones to die.
The fodder. Yeah.
Yeah. But they were all white. Weird.
Yeah. It's also listed as a horror mystery.
mystery. Yeah, and I love the clue comparison because I didn't even think about that. That's a good comparison. I don't know, like top 100 horror movies for me, no. 200 probably not, but something about it just keeps bringing me back. And one of my favorite parts in the movie is where the front of this one is where she finds all the Barbies and like kind of with the heads missing and what she was setting up. I love that she had this planned out with Barbies waiting for all this to happen. Also, who the fuck would want to stay at a place like that? You better get a waiver ready. You better get some lawyers on site because you're going to traumatize the shit out of some people. Like when I'm watching again today and actually like thinking about it, I'm like, this is insane. Like it's like a haunted house, but you're staying there. You're paying all this money to sleep over the weekend while someone is killing your friends and family. Like, what the fuck? Who wants to do that? It makes no sense to me. But my biggest takeaway is get better friends. When I worked at Walmart, I had a lot of friends like that, and it's just it rubs on you. I don't know how they were still friends if they were like that all the time. But other than that, like I guess the memorable part, like any of the characters, do they stick out to you? You know, when you think about it, not really. Besides the ones you know from other films, the girl from Friday the 13th. Like the whole time, I'm like, who is it? Oh, that's who that is. And that's that's what you think about. You don't think about her in this movie. Biff, you don't think about him in this movie. The other people, I don't even know who the hell they are. So I can see that from someone who watched it. And we got to understand, John, you and I have to understand that this is a pure soul in Kellen with this movie that has never seen it before. So really his opinion is the most important one today, because this is his fresh set of eyes on this movie that we've seen probably, 15 times between us. So I get it looking at it from that perspective. But again, just like with Sleepaway Camp, you watch Sleepaway Camp, Kellen? Yeah?
Yes, that was one that got spoiled for me at FrankenCon last year because of the poster that they had.
Yeah,
I remember you asked me about that, and I was like, you know what movie got spoiled for me, and I still haven't gotten over, is the last James Bond movie. But I digress.
He dies. He fucking dies.
That's a side conversation, but yeah. Again,
and I'm still bitter about it.
Again, like I said, I'm the easiest to please in the group. You probably have figured that out if you listen to us enough. So I did enjoy this movie. There's only 3 of us. This went by pretty fast, but let's wrap it up. We'll do our rankings. I have TJ's ranking. He's also going to, if you're listening or watching, he's going to pop in at some point, edit himself in. So he'll be here with his opinion as well. But I went ahead and got his ranking. So let's go around with our rankings and close up shop. Kellen?
Like I said, it for me, because I don't have the nostalgia, it's forgettable. It's head and shoulders above Creepshow, that garbage movie. But but I mean, this is that, and that's a running gag between me and John. So apologies, John. But I mean, it's an enjoyable film. It was just long enough. It didn't overstay its welcome. I think that's where they probably could have gotten a lower rating for me, as if it would have drug out more. But it's right in that sweet spot, a little over hour 20. I think hour 26, somewhere in there, 28. So perfect amount of time for a Saturday afternoon, easy watch horror film. That's probably, if you wanted to introduce your kids to horror, this might be one of the ones to do, because it's not so over the top, it's not so vulgar, it's not so violent. So all that to say, it's a 3 for me.
John?
Yeah, I really love it. The end credits music is horrible. I will give you that. That is some of the worst end credits music I've ever heard. I heard that today and I was like, holy shit, how did I forget about this? There were certain parts of it I really did love, though, like the end where there's the reveal and the boyfriend is still behind the door banging on the wall, and the guy with the prosthetic comes up and kisses him, and that was so funny to me. I don't know why. I want to give it a 4 out of 5, but I know that that's the nostalgia talking. So, like, as a film, it's going to be a 3.5 out of 5, but I really love it. So, yeah, 3.5.
That's fair. I gave it a 3.5 as well. I was a 3 until Kellen said 3, so then I bumped it up, because the way I feel about it and the way he feels about it, we had to have different scores. So that makes it about a 3. TJ gave it a 2.5. Spoiler alert: when he comes on later, he gave it a 2.5, and did the exclamation mark when he said that to me, but he didn't respond. So that brings it down to a 3. He gave it a lower rating than Kellen. So I'm kind of glad he wasn't on here with us because we might have fought, But all right, so that's
I'm not the worst.
No, not this week. Not this week, at least. Again, Joe Lynch, Barbara Crampton, we are so sorry for Kellen and his words on Suitable Flesh. Joe, I know we said we would murder him. We're getting to it. I promise.
I just want to say, can we get some Horror Sanctum shirts that across the back say "Kill the One"?
Kill the one. The one must die.
When we mass produce, we will 100% do that.
Okay, so April Fool's Day, 1986, one-off slasher classic. I discovered this movie very early on in my horror, probably on like Encore or Stars or something. When I first got cable in middle school, maybe early high school. It was one that was on a lot, lived in the cable universe. I used to have the whole DVD of it. I know I'd watched this movie several times, and then the last year I got the Blu-ray just to watch the special features and whatnot this past year. So I'd recently watched the Blu-ray, and that was a good transfer. I didn't keep the Blu-ray because I feel like this movie is one of those that once you kind of know the gimmick, and it buries the lead, unlike almost any other horror movie ever. April Fool's Day, that's the surprise. It's all an April Fool's Day joke, which was very different for 1986. I did rewatch it again this past week before recording. And for whatever reason, this is probably my 4th time, I believe, watching it over the years. I had always thought of this as a slightly above average film. I do think it lives and occupies a pretty unique space. It is one of the better one-off slasher films with a decent premise and gimmick. I think the best one of those is the original My Bloody Valentine. I do think that is a better film, more classic. This one occupies a pretty unique space, and in history, it's fairly unique. It does have one of the better endings in terms of doing something original and unique, which in 1986, when this was released, was very ahead of its time, I think, in a lot of ways. It didn't set up, it wasn't a premise that could really be set up very well for a series. So it was always probably approached as a one-off, because once you know the gimmick, April Fool's Day, you can only really do that once, right? That is a one-off concept. If people don't automatically, and I think what it had going for it more in 1986 than in 2024, not as much, as people weren't expecting, even though you called it April Fool's Day, people probably weren't expecting that the entire thing is an April Fool's Day joke. In 2024, we're a little more cynical. We've seen more things, and you have to market things differently. But in 86, it was ahead of its time. It did something unlike what most slasher films of that era were doing. However, in reassessing the impact of that, I will say, in my memory, this is a solid 3 out of 5. Maybe the first time I watched it, it might have even been a 3.5 out of 5. But I do believe it is diminishing returns, even though it definitely occupies an interesting place in history, and especially in slasher history and 80s slasher history, which is, super niche thing, right? But to all of us genre fans, we know that this is technically it's a tier above. However, I deducted a point down to 2.5 upon my probably at least my 4th rewatch. It might be my 5th over the years. And the thing about this movie is, and I have watched it 2 consecutive years in a row. And the last year I've watched it twice, which I think is too recent. you almost have to kind of forget what happens in this movie, other than maybe the big reveal at the end, to really be lured in by its charms. I think you need several years in between to really kind of forget some of these set pieces and things. And once you kind of know how the sausage is made, so to speak, it definitely loses some impact and some rewatchability. So that's why I deducted down to 2.5, which is a solid middle of the road film upon rewatches. I think the first time you watch this, it's a solid 3.5, depending on your scale. It's definitively not a 4 or higher film. It's just not. I mean, it's got some good actors and actresses for that era. I mean, dude that plays Biff and the Back to the Future films is in it, and he's a fun cut up character. You got Amy Steele from one of the better Friday the 13th films. It's hitting above its weight for 1986. We'll say that. And the first time you watch it, if you don't already figure out the ending way before they get there, it's good. It just don't ever live up to that on rewatches, in my opinion. So that's maybe why I brought it down just a little bit. And, I still think it's a solid movie. Will I watch it again? Eventually, probably, because it does occupy that very rare air of being one of only a handful of April Fool's Day horror films that I know. So it does have that, that perennial annual revisitability. It's not one I'd watch every year, but every decade maybe. I mean, it is probably, and I've only seen maybe like 2 other April Fool's Day films, but it's probably the best of those, which is a small niche for sure. But it was in the era of let's make a slasher film about every possible holiday. And by now they pretty much have done that. But in 86, they still had one left. April Fool's Day. We did it. And so 2.5 for me, after having watched it multiple times over the years. Still worth the watch. I recommend watching it. And maybe never watching it again, because you'll never like it more than after that first watch. So just leave that in your mind. If I'd have left it in my mind, not rewatched it for this podcast, I'd have had a 3 out of 5. So, maybe just watch it once and live on in your memories.
All right, so that's it for this week's episode. Be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel, to wherever you're listening to this podcast. Follow us on Instagram. Follow us on TikTok. I've been trying to be a little bit more active on TikTok and giving some different videos that you can't find on Facebook or Instagram. But sometimes I just don't have the inspiration. I don't know who the hell's looking at that stuff. But we do have a TikTok if you're into that sort of thing. Again, as we said earlier, this is our last episode ever. So sorry. But that's it. So signing off forever, I'm Jay with John and Kellen. And until next time,
Keep it spooky.
Kellen won.
You got it. You got it. You got me on that one. The battle.